What's up, y'all, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing really well out there.
And for y'all who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we always like to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, what you been playing?
Yeah, I've stepped a little back into some old favorites here.
Nice.
Obviously, Cyberpunk. I mentioned last time that I was, dabbling in the Cyberpunk, checking out some of this new updates. Continued on with the 2.0 update and a little bit of the Liberty City. I always call it Liberty City, Phantom Liberty DLC. And I've really enjoyed this game, and I'm really obviously liking it a whole lot more now that the game is way more stable. I know we had a pretty unique experience with it originally, that we were just lucky enough. But playing the game in what I think it's its true form with the new 2.0 update just makes a whole lot more sense. I see the vision, it clicks a lot better. Them including things that we saw in the anime, the Netflix anime Edge Runners, adding a few features from that. Makes me see that this game now leans slightly more into that sort of role-playing mechanics. I see a lot of that sort of trade-offs. If you want some of the new cyber equipment, you have to worry about a certain meter. If you get too much cyber equipment and your meter fills up, it causes all these negative effects. So it's really interesting to see what it is. I just wish there was a world, a timeline that this game launched in the state it's in now, because you're looking at a pretty amazing game, if not someone's top game ever. Like it's in a discussion for me in one of my favorite games of almost of all time. It would probably be pretty low on that list depending on what I'm looking at, but I can't short staff how much fun I'm having with it. It's the main and one reason I've sort of put down Starfield. I don't have much else to say about Starfield, because shortly after we discussed last time, maybe 2 days later, I tried playing more Starfield, and I feel like the sort of new sheen, a new game came out, sort of wore off on me, and a lot of these issues came up. And Cyberpunk was there to take me on, and it's just such an interesting, amazing game, and I always forgot about that. And just how much this 2.0 update really changed just a few mechanical things, being able to shoot while in vehicles, a lot of other things they've added where you can now, while you're sliding, you can reload, you can shoot. It's just these little sort of moment fixes that just were kind of holding the game back, or finally letting it breathe. I haven't played story-wise too much more in the Phantom Liberty section, just because I do like the way it's integrated. It kind of just happens at the same time the game's happening. Story-wise, I've gotten the premise. I see what it's supposed to have me do. I don't know. It hasn't had me do anything that you don't do in the normal game yet, so I can't speak to the value of that. I think Idris Elba does really well. I think his voice acting's really superb. And just in a world that we lately have had multiple celebrities sort of jumping into the voice acting game, and to different successes and not, and that's something I'll bring up in my next game I'm playing. We obviously know what I'm talking about, but yeah, Cyberpunk, I have to say, what an amazing game. I'm having a great time with it, and I'm just really excited to see what this game story-wise has to offer. And I know that it adds a new ending to the game, so I haven't beaten the game on this new playthrough yet, so I'm interested to see if I can continue what I've done in Phantom Liberty to get this new ending, and what that may mean for the future. But overall, I just really still love this game. I mean, I thought I would just dabble in, and I've clocked in like 32 hours or something like that, without the actual DLC. So really excited for that. The other thing I alluded to, obviously, I've been playing Mortal Kombat 1. I know you have as well. Mortal Kombat 1 fully launched, has come out, and we've spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time with it, story-wise, gameplay-wise. I'd like to say online-wise, but the servers have been pretty dog water, so it's been hard to do. But Mortal Kombat has come out, it's a reboot / sequel, as we discussed when the game was being announced, and I really enjoy this. I've really liked the liberties they've taken on changing a few of these story beats, having characters completely omitted, re-emitted, completely changed of who they are, and it's such a smart way to do multiverse / reboots, but also continuing a successing timeline. I think it's just really fun. I think I've never been a huge Johnny Cage fan. I think this Johnny Cage is probably the best. I would say is the best iteration of him. He's funny, he's quirky, and I think his moveset actually really works. Story-wise, obviously the game is just... It is Mortal Kombat, so, again, you have people turning into lizards, people whose powers are screaming, people who turn off fire and shoot ice. So, thematically, it's kind of nuts. I think this engine that they're using and what they were able to pull out, I'm playing on PS5, with the voice acting and voice animation and the face animations are superb. I don't know how they did that, which is why I was always confused why the game was coming to Switch. And there's a couple critiques. Not everyone's voice acting hits. Not to harp on it too much, but I think it's general knowledge now. Megan Fox definitely phoned in her voice acting. Her character just, it's just weird because they made that character straight up her face. And it's kind of jarring when, not to get into the spoilers of the story, but there's moments where there's a lot of people on screen, and then you just have Megan Fox sprinkled in the audience, and it's just with wings. It's very weird. It's a little weird, and in a game like Cyberpunk, like we were talking, it kind of makes sense because everyone looks that way. But then you have a game like this that everyone is unique and their own person, and then you just have a celebrity in there. But the gameplay is really fun. It's a big reminiscent. I would say it's definitely a cross of what Mortal Kombat 9 and Mortal Kombat X did. I know people had mixed feelings on where 11 went. I enjoyed 11 a lot, and I think as someone who was in that boat, Mortal Kombat 1 kind of hits a mix of all three that makes it very unique in its own way. The way the whole cameo system works, I'm not super fond of it, but I do understand it. It's not super intrusive as a 3v3 fighter or anything like that. I do know that I have never been very good at, in any game, sort of air combat in any sense. So when a game is so integrated with that, I can't do any of that. I do have opponents that will do it to me, and I'm like, that's cool. I don't have that skill to do that input. It's specifically in Mortal Kombat. But all in all, I think it's a very solid fighter. It's crazy to think that we got, Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat 1, and in a few months, a new Tekken also quickly. So all these games are going to be alive and thriving at the same time. So it's very, very exciting. And the last thing, not just harp on too long, the last thing I've jumped back into, Sonic Frontiers has gotten its free update, the Final Horizons. Free DLC, free story DLC. And I really want to like this more than I do. I think they took some feedback that people were complaining about worries and stuff. You get to play as the other characters. You get to play as Amy, Tails, and Knuckles. And I think for the most part, they control almost identical to Sonic, but they all have a sort of gimmick. Knuckles obviously has the glide ability, but the way they animated his glide ability is you have this slow animation before you glide, and then the controls are terrible. He flies like he's sludging through oil in the air. I haven't played too much of it just because I have been putting my time in Mortal Kombat and Cyberpunk. I do want to sit a little bit more time with the DLC to see what it has to offer, because right now it's been recycled map, recycled puzzles, recycled animations, it's a lot of just recycled stuff. Again, it's a completely free update, so I can't harp on it too much. It's not like I dropped $30 on this or anything like that. It may just be too little too late in a sense. I don't know what else it has to offer, but I'm also just not in the mindset to play more Sonic Frontiers. Especially when I saw that there's no more trophies added to it. It's kind of a letdown, because what's the point? But all in all, I've kind of been playing a little bit of everything, juggling stuff, but everything's hitting its right notes for me right now. So what have you been up to?
Sure. So I've been playing a lot of the same games, one of which I was about to start, but I haven't gotten around to just because of time constraints. So that's Resident Evil. So I'll get to that at some point, the little Ada Wong DLC, which...
that's right.
I mean, speaking of Ada Wong and her voice actress, let me just go to Mortal Kombat real quick. So I beat story mode last night. Loved it. Okay. Had a blast. Love this game. Feels good. What I like about it is how weighty it is. And I think Mortal Kombat titles have kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of the... Less so the speed and obviously nothing as far as like button combos and stuff like that. But more so like the weightiness of them. Some of them are heavier than others. And I love the weight of this one. where you just really feel that impact for this one. I love the visual aesthetic. It's just beautiful graphics. I love the incorporation of HDR in there, how bright and vibrant this game is compared to a lot of the previous entries. I just love, especially like, I was big into 10, and that 10 is a much darker, just visual game. And so seeing this one so bright, it actually really works for me. And what I like about it is, it's like a reboot, but obviously, if you understand the Mortal Kombat timeline system, everything's still in continuity, kind of. Like, it all kind of happened. It informs, Liu Kang's position at the beginning of this. But I feel like this is the first game that maybe spent enough time on the timeline stuff to make it really click for me, because I was always very not confused, is when all that Chronica stuff was happening, I just had trouble fully comprehending what exactly was happening here. And so this was the first one that I think made it all kind of fit together better for me, which definitely motivates me to go back. I don't think I'm going all the way back, but certainly 2011 Mortal Kombat, the reboot.
Yep, MK9. Well, everyone refers to it MK9, but yeah, MK 2011.
Okay, so that one I think I'm gonna go back to that and play through the story modes from that point onward, so I can see the second timeline with the context of like how it works now that I understand. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if I can binge a fighting game story like that. I'd never done that before, so we'll see. I mean, it has a very fixed kind of gameplay style, so and fatigue can always set in, so I'm gonna give a try to that. I'm gonna hunt down a copy of that and probably play it on my Xbox or something like that. But that's probably going to be my next place to go in the next hole that I get. I mean, I'm anticipating maybe tail end of this year, holiday season, I might have some time. So I'm going to give that a shot. So yeah, Mortal Kombat 1's been a blast. I've been sprinkling in Starfield here and there. As other things have come out, it's become a lot harder for me to play Starfield because I didn't love it to begin with. I think I wanted to play it because, it's like a big moment for gaming. It's a big moment for Xbox. It's a Bethesda game, so I wanted to play it. And there's certainly things I liked about it, but overall, my moment-to-moment was just a little boring for me. And so with all the new things that came out, that I just find a lot more fun. It's a little bit harder for me to motivate myself to play it for really long chunks. So I play it here and there. I'm making progress in the game. It's cool. Like, there are some interesting threads that they're introducing. I'm still having a lot of problems with the characters specifically. There's this new companion I like that she's alright, but for the most part, I don't really like anyone. They're all pretty stale to me. So that's kind of unfortunate. I think if I was more into the characters, that could totally sell it for me a lot better, but it's not really doing it for me. So yeah, Starfield, not a lot of time there. I've been playing Lies of P as much as I can. I love it. It's so good. But it's a Souls-like game, so naturally if you hit a wall, you hit a wall, and then I just gotta bang it out. But the good thing is, what I will say about it is this is the closest I've seen to a Soulsborne game come out that actually feels like Bloodborne, specifically Bloodborne. Because FromSoft does lots of different styles of games, and like genre-wise, obviously Elden Ring, Sekiro, Bloodborne, all these are the same genre, but they don't feel the same, even though it's the same developer. What I like about Lies of P is it feels like Bloodborne. Now, you can tell it's not a FromSoft game. There's a level of depth that they incorporate into the worlds, which I forget. Apologies, I don't know the developer of Lies of P, but they do a very good job for not FromSoft, you know what I mean? But the game is just amazingly made. The world is really interesting. It just plays really nice. There is a level of depth that's missing there. Some of the hit marker tech is not like perfect, you know what I mean? I definitely get clipped at times where it's not like frame perfect the way that FromSoft games are. So there are small differences you might notice. But overall, I'm really liking it. I'm on a boss right now that I'm having a little difficulty with, but the good thing is they have very similar systems. So if you understand Dark Souls and Bloodborne, then you'll know how to play this for the most part. And I found the leveling system to be pretty responsive and pretty fair. I don't bump into too many BS situations, you know what I mean, where you're just like, oh, come on. Like, for the most part, like, they're fair. They open up the world in very smart ways so that you kind of bump into challenges that you'll probably lose a couple times. But for the most part, everything I bumped into, you're eventually able to, like, grind out for the most part. I haven't hit, like, an insane wall. Like, even the boss that I'm on right now, I'm at the point where I'm getting him down to 25%. So it's not like I'm so far beyond from being able to beat him. So yeah, overall, Lies of P, very recommended. It's on Game Pass right now, so anybody who has Game Pass can play it at any point. But yeah, amazing game. And then lastly, yeah, I've also been playing Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. I don't think I'm as far as you because I haven't seen Idris's character yet. Okay. I'm maybe an hour and a half in, maybe. I scavenge a lot, so
the beginning of that specific section is a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, way longer. It's taken, which I can appreciate. Like I mean, this is not a cheap DLC. This was like $30, so that is not an insignificant number. So I was hoping I got like my money's worth for it, and so far I'm pretty happy with it. One thing I like how theatrical it is. Like it's very cinematic, and which is a stark contrast from not all of what regular Cyberpunk was, because it definitely has its moments, especially like that car chase stuff that was unfortunately like super broken in the original run. But it has its moments like that, and I love the premise of it, and the president's really cool, and like there's cool things about it. I don't love Dogtown as just a set piece quite yet. It's the moments where it kind of opens up and you can kind of like look around. I haven't loved it. I understand like it's supposed to be like a dump, so it's not like it's way more. Mad Max is not the right word, because it's more just like dilapidated, abandoned city, more so, because there is a desert portion that is literally Mad Max, but the Badlands. So, but yeah, Dogtown's not my favorite, but I don't think I've explored it all anyways, so I can't fully judge that area of the map quite yet. But I do like how much of a journey it was to even get into it, because I think it offers that level of verticality that I think CD Projekt Red was talking about when they announced Cyberpunk. I don't know if you remember, but they kept talking about the idea that it wasn't as like big, like wide as like Witcher's world, but it was way deeper. There was way more verticality. And then the game came out and there was like very, very little verticality. And things like this fulfill that promise, I think, that they were making, where you're going through underground tubes and there's so much paths and stuff like that, and you're going down and deeper, and then you finally arrive to this other area that it really is just kind of a siphoned off, fenced off area of the city. Like you're still in the main night city, but to get there is very creative. So I can appreciate that it adds some verticality there. I don't think outside the context of that one DLC moment you could probably explore all that again. I don't know. Maybe you could backtrack your way through that. I suppose all the elevators and all that probably still work, so you could probably go through that if you wanted to. But overall, yeah, I like it. I'm don't know how long this DLC is, so hopefully if I can get 5-6 hours out of it, I'd be pretty content, because at the production quality that I've seen so far, I'm feeling like they've realized some of the vision that they had initially. But I'm curious to see when it's all said and done, what my thoughts are about this addition to the map, because so far I probably still prefer regular Night City to anything that Dogtown has kind of introduced yet. But yeah, that's everything I've played. It's pretty much just those 4 games, and then Mario Kart, but I don't really report on that because I play that pretty periodically, to be honest with you. So
very very true.
Yeah, because they have these. I think that we're waiting on the final wave right now, which low-key also people are sleeping on the fact that they're adding characters to Mario Kart, which is like, what? People don't talk about that.
The final DLC, I think we discussed when we talked about the last Nintendo Direct. I think we're getting Diddy Kong, fan favorite. I think Funky Kong too.
Funky Kong too. Yeah, it's the tropical. Yeah. What is it? Not tropical freeze. Is it? It's that whole crew, basically. Yeah. Whatever that Wii crew is. But that's kind of exciting that they're actually adding characters, because I wish they would just freaking add Zelda or something like that, but that's fine. I'll take more Kongs, I suppose. But yeah, no, as someone who plays every single wave as they come out, there's amazing value that I'm getting. Like, that's the one reason why I even still have Nintendo Switch Online. Like, I would otherwise get rid of it, but then I'd have to buy the DLC piecemeal, and I don't want to do that. So that's been a tremendous value for me. I mean, they're adding multiple courses every time there's a new wave. A lot of them are from Mario Kart Tour specifically, which is a game that I don't play because I don't like the phone controls. So it's allowed me to experience otherwise pretty solid maps in the proper form factor. So if anybody's looking for a reason to go back, if you haven't touched it in a while, you'll probably have over a dozen new maps to go on. So I think, or tracks. So I think you'll get a kick out of that.
Yeah, I do have a couple left that I haven't done yet. So I do need to get back to that.
Yeah, you're sleeping on that.
Yeah,
but we got some huge stories this week. Let's get into the big one that everybody's been talking about. There have been major Microsoft leaks. So this is by Taylor Lyles over there at IGN. But this week, several unredacted, highly confidential documents from Microsoft began appearing online. And apparently these documents were part of Microsoft's legal case against the U.S. regulator, the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC. And so this is some of what was leaked. So we'll just go one by one and give our thoughts, because each one is kind of a story in and of itself. The first one, Elder Scrolls 6 is an Xbox console exclusive. Now, this is one that they've been very cagey about. It's been something that people have been concerned about. What exclusivity looks like in relation to acquisitions is always going to be a question, especially when it relates to like Microsoft. And so the big one was how is Elder Scrolls 6 was going to be impacted. I can't remember your answer. I said pretty concretely I didn't think it was going to be an exclusive, because if you take their other numbers, we know that they are pretty dwarfed by PlayStation in terms of sales at this point. And so I didn't think they would voluntarily shoot themselves in the foot. However, on this other hand, obviously Elder Scrolls is a draw enough that could be the boost that need to. They certainly won't match PlayStation, but it will certainly boost them. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think I was always very half and half. Like, I understood it both ways, which it still kind of speaks to it. I think this is a game that's going to make people want to buy your system / your membership, but it also is so big that you think you'd want as much money as you can from it, and obviously that'd be a huge sell. So I was more shocked at how definitive was in their internal email. Obviously, none of this was supposed to be public, but because of how cagey and tiptoeing, especially the main man Phil has been over specifically Elder Scrolls, right? The Starfield thing wasn't really a big deal, but Elder Scrolls has been a huge thing. There's people that's the game they play, right? There was that grandma who only played Skyrim forever.
Oh, yeah.
Now she's going to have to get an Xbox if she's still around. I don't know how old she was. If she's still around.
Like that.
If she's still around by the time Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, it's like she'll have to get an Xbox or a PC because it is what it is. So, though I'm shocked at the same time, not shocked, but I'm like, oh, they are going that route, which, again, with the amount of money they overpaid for Bethesda, I would want to make it exclusive as well. Yeah, and I think once I saw Starfield completely exclusive, I kind of started coming around to the idea that so would Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of strategic sense, for sure. It's just, I think I'm still just grappling with the idea of them voluntarily, because they were the ones themselves, and obviously part of this was strategic why they did this, but they were the ones who were emphasizing how much of a lead both PlayStation, even Nintendo in many ways, have over them, and how they are not even close to majority market share, and we can't move consoles, and we have trouble pulling people from the PlayStation side, and this and this and this. And on one hand, yeah, they say like we have all these holes in our release schedule, which we can talk about, but at the same time, it's like the idea that they'll be like, okay, we're guaranteeing that this sells a quarter of what Skyrim ever sold. Because keep in mind, Skyrim was not only multiple generation releases, but it was multi-platform release. So this is going to be one platform. Yeah, it'll probably get multiple release cycles, knowing how Todd can be, but I don't know, man. It seems like a hard sell where it's like you're basically maxing out your sales at whatever, because if you're let's say you got like 20 million out in the wild, whatever number they're at right now, just guaranteeing that like that entire PlayStation base never touches Elder Scrolls. I don't know, man. It seems like a hard sell for me. Like timed exclusivity, sure, but like permanent, this will never be on PlayStation consoles. It's because I think, and maybe this is just me being pessimistic, is I bet this kills Elder Scrolls before it boosts Xbox, if that makes sense. Like, I think there will be a contingent of people who are like, oh, fine, I love Elder Scrolls this much, I will get what I need to do to play it. But I bet more people say, "Oh, then I just won't play this one." That's
very true.
And again, this is just speculation. And again, I hope that this, if they do go the exclusive route, that this is enormously popular and successful for Xbox. I hope it is, but at the same time, I bet more people opt out than Switch consoles at this point. I mean, just Microsoft themselves talked about how entrenched people are, and if they played Elder Scrolls on the Elder Scrolls came out, or Skyrim came out in 2011, so we're talking about 12 years ago. You know, we're talking all that time that they spent on at least one ecosystem. That's assuming that they didn't, maybe play on PlayStation 1 and 2 as well. To jump now to Xbox, where you're basically going to jump to a console with peace and love. You'll play Elder Scrolls 6 on and nothing else because they have such issues releasing other titles. I don't know, man. I bet most people would just be like, I'll just not play that.
Skip it.
Or PC it. They'll probably PC it before they'll Xbox it. But yeah, I don't know. Because again, they said Xbox console exclusive, so it's going to be on PC. I bet way more PlayStation people will be willing to take a look at the PC side than jump at the Xbox.
Yep.
But so yeah, that's Elder Scrolls 6. Very interesting development there, but unsurprising for anybody who was paying attention. Activision was briefed on a Switch successor late last year. Yeah, I mean, the Switch successor talk has been floating around for a while. It's obviously an inevitability timeline-wise. The Switch came out in 2017 now, so we're 6 years away from release. A lot of cycles at this point, not counting mid-generation refreshes, are around 7 to 8 years. So we're already barking up against a time where release would make a lot of sense, let alone briefed on a successor existing. Obviously, it exists. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those. Yeah, of course they were. As we've seen Xbox go on and on how they want, to get Nintendo back on the Call of Duty train. You're not doing that on Switch. Mortal Kombat 1 just showed us that you cannot.
Oh my God, yeah.
Get that. Let alone the whatever 150 gigs each Call of Duty game is now. So obviously having Activision, be known of what the next Switch is, and we've heard it from other sources now, and I think we're estimating sometime next year now, I think, is when we're gonna maybe see it. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, timeline wise, you would imagine it has to. Nintendo's in an interesting position where like everybody, it seems like, is screaming from the rooftops like, hey, your hardware is getting too old, you need to release it, like a new hardware now, which low-key happens to them every generation, to be honest with you, but they still move units. So at the same time, like, they don't need to move on our timelines, because if their sales fell off a cliff, that's an entirely different situation. Like if Switch sales completely plateaued and like maybe they hit critical mass, and then you gotta go. If there was a thing where no major titles were coming to the title, but there is a steady stream of indies, third parties, first party releases. So that's the frustrating thing about it, where it's like, yeah, I think everybody can admit like it's time for a Switch successor, and obviously this exists, but at the same time, timeline could be as open as they kind of want. You know what I mean? Like they could launch 2024, I think, makes a ton of sense. But then again, if Nintendo's like, oh, no, we're not going until 2026, what are you gonna do about it? You know what I mean? Like, it's still selling insane. So, I mean, if they wanted to, they could do a tiny little refresh and buy some more time if they like. Like a late PlayStation port or Pro type, Xbox Series X type thing. They could buy themselves some time if they really, really wanted to. Now, obviously, us as gamers, we want them to really do that proper next console, but I think there's a lot of people who are more than happy with the existing hardware they have right now, because all the discussions are related to power. And to be honest, if you really cared about playing a high fidelity version of Mortal Kombat, do you think you're even on Switch exclusively? Like, to be honest with you, you know what I mean? Like, the Switch plays what it needs to play. And what it needs is those first-party games, to be honest. What it needs is Fortnite and Stardew Valley, Minecraft. Those are the things that it needs. And all of those things, from what I understand, play beautifully. So it's a weird, frustrating position to be in. But yeah, Microsoft is planning to release... This is a big story. Microsoft is planning to release updated Xbox Series X and S models next year. and we have a look at it, and it reminds me of that KFC console. Actually, do you remember that?
I do remember that. Wow.
It was like a weird can sphere thing. It actually kind of reminds me of this, but and we do have visuals of it. So if you pull up the story in IGN for anybody who's listening, you can take a look at what we got here, and it's basically just a cylindrical version of what they've done previously. It's sleek, it's clean. It kind of looks like an air purifier, low key. I have an air purifier that looks exactly like this. And then if you look at Project Elwood, that's the Xbox Series S refresh. It looks almost exactly the same, so no changes there. And then the new Xbox controller, to me, the lower half of it looks a little bit slimmer, but everything else for the most part, again, this is a refresh because I see a lot of people commenting about like how this looks exactly the same, because it's a refresh. Like it's not the next generation. But yeah, these are what I would imagine to replace the Series X and S. And if you look at some of the updated technologies, it's mostly changes to the way it deals with sustainable power, rest mode, Xbox or USB-C in the front there, better Wi-Fi. So small quality of life improvements. Not too much that would change it to the end user. So there's no. And they could talk about the 4K Gen 9 stuff with the console stuff, but the reality is we're still having trouble having games on Xbox that really even utilize the current console's power, let alone you could release another one that's more powerful, which is all good and great, but if the software isn't there to really utilize it, it doesn't really matter. Based on what they've shown so far, what did you think? Or not shown, but leaked,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how in depth these like PowerPoint. I call them. Oh, yeah. This is a PowerPoint. Somebody saw this. This was presented the way they have it. I think it's interesting that even the Series X refresh is completely digital. They must have some sort of. And I start to think about the games I put in the Series X were like 360 games, really, which would almost eliminate that factor, which kind of sucks for people who want to go backwards without having to go rebuy the game digitally. Weird omission because you have to assume the price point unless the price point's brought down. The Series S obviously, yeah,
it's the same great price, $499. So
it's $499 for. That's a weird one to me because you're getting less bang for your buck there. The Elwood, the Series S refresh. I mean it just looks the same. There is something about that control though that just kind of looks interesting. I just wonder, they've very not much changed their control in a long time. So for them to go slimmer maybe is a weird choice, but with the added of it's interesting to see because we don't know how much of this has changed, but it's like rechargeable and swappable battery pack. Still, they're doing that. It's kind of a weird thing to do, but the only interesting thing is they have on here feel the game point precision haptic feedback, which came out in a email they sent out, and we discussed it at the time where like, would you guys, I don't remember what it was, but Microsoft came out and was like, are you guys interested in haptic feedbacks because of all the praise the DualSense was getting. So them sort of having that one feature their control doesn't have would be interesting. So I'm interested in the control. Besides that, I don't think this refresh, especially someone like me and you who play so much backwards compatibly out of nowhere, last year you played through all the old Assassin's Creed games.
Exactly.
So it's really weird. The bigger thing to me is that Microsoft for a while now has been saying they're not going to do a mid refresh, which was really interesting to me, and I saw that it wasn't really connected to this story, but for a while, Xbox has been talking about how they weren't going to do a mid-refresh. They don't think it needs it. They don't understand it. So I always kind of took that as a tongue-in-cheek lie. They have the Series X, but I thought the Series S for sure was going to get a boost because it's already starting to lag behind. I know there's the big red flag in Baldur's Gate just struggling to get on and run on a Series S. So more interesting to me is, once again, we've seen how... Microsoft and Phil Spencer, these are big corporate guys. Obviously, they're going to lie when they need to lie. But it's weird that they're this much ready to go. You assume this stuff is maybe pre-production. getting the parts and stuff. So it is weird, very, very weird that they were just so against confirming they were going to do a mid refresh or not commenting on it like Sony does. But they have ready to go. I'm telling you, a whole PowerPoint, a whole chart showing the differences in the systems is kind of wild to me.
Yeah, these graphics tell me these are locked in plans. Like they've already aligned on their next strategy for these this refresh. And yeah, as you kind of brought up all the major points, very great. Like I always like to have new tech, so like I'm never opposed to the idea of a mid-generation refresh. Like I'm not opposed to it, but the problem is if you get rid of the disk drive, which I'm not principally against in concept because my PlayStation doesn't have a disk drive. It was $100 cheaper, so I'm like, yeah, sure, like whatever. But at the same time, for Xbox specifically, it's a unique case because of the release schedule of it. If you get rid of the disk drive, historically, we're talking about maybe 60% of the games that I've even played on this console. A majority of what I've played on my Xbox Series X have been previous eras games. A lot of 360, a lot of Xbox One. So it becomes a tricky situation where you're basically taking that completely away, and then you're reliant on the digital prices, which I don't know if you've looked on the storefront, but we're talking a lot of them are like $20 for like 360 games. Yep. If you wanted to play like New Vegas or something like that, it's like $15-20. Like it's insane. And so buying the cheap discs and being able to have that backwards compatibility, like it was a very important selling point for me, which is why like there's many times where I've grabbed my Xbox instead of my PlayStation, especially when I wanted to go to previous generations, because it's actually easier to do so. And so you take that away, it becomes a machine that's going to get a lot less play, especially for the fact if you're asking me to fork out another $500. So this is certainly something I think for like new adoptees, people who don't have Xboxes yet, which according to them is a majority of players, I guess. So you know, there's a lot. This is for somebody new rather than an upgrade, unless you don't touch the disc drive whatsoever. But for me personally, also it is also my 4K Blu-ray player. So when I do watch 4K Blu-rays, which here and there I do, my MCU films and stuff like that, I do need that disc drive to some degree. So I can't update to this, and I don't really have any interest in the Series S personally. I'm also kind of interested on a point that they don't talk about is the fact that it's cylindrical if you look. So without a very specifically designed adapter, there's no way to have it horizontally. So this is a vertical only console too. Nobody's brought that up with the fact that it was not a cube, but like whatever, a tower before. And I have mine on my side personally. I know everybody has it a different way, but it just vents on through the side basically in the back. And I have it kind of like tucked under my TV, works perfectly, just like the PS5 is tucked under the TV. But this one you'd have to have standing up. So that's also interesting, is I wonder if they also have data about that, because I would imagine they have gyroscopic things in the console to probably get data on that. So I wonder if a majority of players have it standing up, so they went with that. I'm just curious what went into the design of it, why to go from a tower to a cylinder, because that is a drastic aesthetic change for a console. Like we haven't seen that many consoles completely change the shape and aesthetic of their consoles. Like obviously PS4 had the towering thing, so you know, less layers, you know, as it got more slim and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was the same form factor. Maybe it gets slimmer, maybe it gets thinner, you know, all that. But this one is a straight up shape change. So I wonder if there's like maybe an air cooling reason why they did that the tower was maybe limiting. So there's questions I have there, but it is kind of an interesting direction that they've gone in. Next one, Fallout 3 and Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion are getting remastered. Makes a lot of sense. I would want to know the extent of the remaster, because there is more than just the visuals that kind of need to be cleaned up with these. I've played both of these games within the past year, and well, Skyrim has never been the like most fluid animated, you know, game. So Oblivion is not actually worlds behind that, but for the most part, I think they need a little bit more than just a visual cleanup, to be honest with you. What do you think about this?
Yeah, you know, I get it. These are some fan favorites. if I'm gonna play an old Fallout, I'll go to Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
And same if I'm in an Elder Scrolls mood, I would normally go to Skyrim. And these have their charm, these have their rightful place. I think these games need way more than just a remaster. When I think remaster, I think there are it's gonna play at whatever 4K 60, let's say. I don't want to see these models in 4K. They're gonna be gross. So it's really weird. Again, and now if it's a lot of tinkering, a lot of controls, a lot of just sort of things to get them up to par, I understand, but we've seen company after company slap the remastered on it, and all they did was really port it. So that does worry me, especially when you have a company like Bethesda and Xbox who haven't proven themselves to be completely up to their word. But I mean, that'd be nice to have a new version of these games, sort of to keep rolling. Instead of just having them stuck in their native form.
Absolutely. The next one's another somewhat big one, but obviously makes sense timeline-wise. Xbox is planning to release a next-gen Xbox console in 2028. But there is additional information to that. That would be the 10th generation console. But one document release mentions that the Xbox system will be a next-generation hybrid game platform with development test kits slated to launch in 2027. And so apparently we're talking about a potential consumer handheld device with cloud streaming capabilities. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what some people hoped the PlayStation Portal was, basically, with the ability to stream directly cloud games onto it, instead of just streaming the console as it's on. It's interesting. So 2028 makes a ton of sense, especially with the fact that, again, we just talked about the 7-year not dev cycle, but cycle of a console, the life cycle of a console. And these consoles came out in 2021, so 2028 would make it 7 years in. Makes total sense, especially with a refresh coming out in 2024. That's pretty much right in the middle. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense for them to come out. But from 2028, we're 5 years off now at this point. I would imagine the information about what this console will even really look like in terms of tech is probably pretty scant at this point. We probably don't have a good idea. I don't think even Microsoft necessarily knows exactly what the capabilities of this console will be, because we don't know where the industry is going to be in 5 years. But this makes sense. Any thoughts about this?
Nothing shocking. I think we've always sort of guessed 2027, 8 for this next generation. But again, like you're saying, it's so far off, really, that none of these details are really set in stone in the slightest. The sort of cloud device, the thin OS type deal thing they discussed in the documents. I mean, it's interesting, just for the fact that it's like how much they're all in on this, on the clouding and everything like that. We have a few TVs that are starting to come out with Xbox devices and like that little sort of Fire Stick TV thing. So them going on a, let's say PlayStation Portals type device that does a little bit more than what most people want. Most people realize the Portal doesn't do, makes sense, especially when it's this cloud-based system, so you don't have to do too much hardware stuff. So it's all stuff that we kind of already knew and at least suspected of them. But it is interesting to see. It's just all this is very interesting to see, like, written down, because it's like they've had these hard discussions of what's going on. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think another interesting portion of this that maybe is kind of going overlooked is the fact that with this document, which we can assume to be correct since it's directly leaked related to the lawsuit, is basically confirming that both the two major publishers, PlayStation, Sony, or not PlayStation, Sony, PlayStation and Xbox, are both jumping back into the handheld market, which we both were hoping, not necessarily predicted, but like especially with the Steam Deck success, hoping that maybe reinvigorates some of these people to reconsider their conclusions on handheld gaming. But both have jumped back in seemingly in non-traditional matters. So neither of them seem to be interested in native processing handhelds anymore. Both of them see the cloud potential and the streaming potential of handheld devices. So that's another thing that's kind of interesting to me, where these are like quicker options that maybe to these console makers outside of Nintendo is that native processing handhelds is just not a thing that is worth their time, especially when they seem to be in a power race, 4K ray tracing, trying to get as powerful as these consoles can be. Obviously they always lag behind PC, but and so with these kind of strategy that they're going into in terms of power, surprisingly, they don't seem interested in competing in the way that Steam Deck is, which I think has found enormous success and found a way to be a handheld but also be powerful simultaneously. With Apple going into that direction, it's interesting that both Microsoft and Sony don't see that as a viable strategy going forward. That's what's interesting to me. It speaks a lot to, I guess, at least their outlook on the industry currently, where maybe what Steam Deck has done is not appealing to them. Maybe they're not impressed by those numbers. I don't know.
Okay. No, that's a very, very good point.
Because I feel like and obviously Nintendo is doing what it's doing, and they've been open about the fact that both Microsoft and Sony see Nintendo as something else, not even direct competition necessarily. Like they're just doing their own thing. If the Steam Deck was really truly disruptive to the industry, like an entire pipeline of gaming that was lighting the world on fire, that Sony and Microsoft truly looked at and said, we have no answer to that, I think they would be moving in that direction. But the fact that they're not, and they're like, nah, we're going to go for a cheaper streaming option, to me tells them that they think there is wider adaptability in terms of a wider populace of people that would be interested in a cheaper streaming device than native processing super powerful in the handheld. I think they think, and I'm not saying they're correct about this, but I think they think that the age of, like, back in the day where, like, we want the most beautiful graphics that I can ride on a bus with, you know what I mean? I think they think that those days are over, and that it's either an IP game like what Nintendo's doing, or it's a streaming cloud-based, I want instantaneous in my hand game, not necessarily power game. That's kind of interesting to me. And then I'm curious to see who turns out to be correct, because right now we have Valve and Apple going one direction, and now Microsoft and Sony going the other, and someone's going to be right. And so I'm just curious to see who sees better returns, if that makes sense.
Very true. Very true.
Next one is kind of something we were very aware of from the lawsuit itself, but Phil Spencer apparently really wants Microsoft to buy Nintendo. An email from August 2020 revealed that Spencer was enthusiastic about acquiring the studio behind beloved video game franchises such as Mario and The Legend of Zelda, and Spencer noted in the email that the acquisition would be a career moment if it happened. The thing about this story is, I think it's maybe people, I don't know why people are surprised by this. Every studio head's gonna want to buy everything. Of course they want Nintendo. I think if Sony had a serious chance at getting Nintendo, I think they'd take Nintendo too. Because I mean, that IP is you want to talk about an IP farm, is about as good as it gets. But I don't think at any point that any of these documents even suggest or allude to the fact that Nintendo was even remotely interested in selling, period, let alone to Microsoft. And so that's the key takeaway, where I think a lot of people are getting lost in the weeds. It's like, oh, they want Mario, or they want Nintendo. It's like, I mean, they can want lots of things. Lots of people want. I want to be a millionaire. Like, it doesn't make me any closer to that happening. And the same deal goes with Phil, I'm sure, Phil Spencer, that would be an immense moment. And I think if you want to talk about something that would close the gap, sure, if you had the next Zelda, the Tears of the Kingdom sequel, coming out as an Xbox exclusive, sure, that would completely disrupt everything. But that isn't even remotely close to happening. And if there was ever a point in history where maybe Nintendo was entertaining that as a possibility, maybe you would consider late Wii U years. The Switch has completely fixed whatever concerns that was and kind of adjusted the financials on that. So any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's one of the things. I saw people kind of losing their mind, and I'm like, guys, this is bar talk. This is, yeah, I want a Lamborghini, I want a Camaro, I want to buy a Nintendo. It's not, yeah, sure. I just thought the wording of it was kind of funny when you look at the email. He's like, it would be a career moment, and I was like, wow, it sounds so evil the way that was sort of phrased out. Like Phil Spencer likes to be this cheerful guy, and he'd be like, yo, I'd be the man if I got Microsoft to buy Nintendo. Nintendo's not for sale. Again, like you said, the closest point that may have been something would have been Wii U time. The Switch has completely changed the game where it's like, that's not going to happen. Again, yeah, of course they're going to want that. Microsoft would buy Sony if they could. It's not this like unheard of thing to be like, I would like to do this because it'd be great for us. Obviously, he's the head of it. He's going to want to do whatever he could to do that. Any company would want to get in the game and buy the company that owns Mario, Zelda, all the IP. So it just was fun. Again, it's just so nuts that it was just that the fact that this is in the ecosystem forever now, that like we know Phil Spencer said this.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think they necessarily have to shy away from that. I mean, if somebody, asked them about it, like, what, do you want to buy Nintendo? They would be like, hell yeah. Like, obviously.
You don't? You don't?
That's what I'm saying. I bet if you look at Jim Ryan's, who we'll get to, his leaked emails, I'm sure they're saying the same thing. Like, bruh, if we could take it, we would. I mean, but I mean, they're not for sale, so what do you want to say? Another one, if we skip a little bit, an email chain shows Microsoft scrambling to fill a huge gap hole in its 2022 game lineup, which, let me tell you something. If there was a story I could have told you before these leaks, it was, yeah, I'm sure they were scrambling. So in May 2022, an email chain between Xbox senior executives, including Spencer, Matt Booty, and Sarah Bond, revealed how Microsoft was scrambling to find games as the company had a huge hole in its lineup last year, and not just last year. Games originally slated to release in 2022. This is the original slate, where Starfield, Redfall, Stalker 2, all delayed, were mentioned in the emails. And apparently, the big takeaway was apparently other interesting tidbits include Microsoft's comments on Baldur's Gate 3, described as a second-run Stadia PC RPG, which people have been really beating them up on, which, yeah, it's a little foul. And I saw the statement Larian put out, which was, or not a statement, but the comment where they were just like, a lot of people underestimated us. Sure, in retrospect, it's a bad look, no doubt. But at the same time, who saw Baldur's Gate being this successful? I don't know. I mean, it's a computer RPG based on D&D. Like, since when do those ever really light the world on fire again? And again, the game, this is coming from somebody who loves Baldur's Gate, who thinks it's like, who can't beat it for the life of them, but I think it's a brilliant game. It's an amazingly made game. But, like, no, none of us saw this blown up. Maybe Baldur's Gate superfans did, but, yeah, no. So I don't beat them up too much on that. But, yeah, very unsurprising that they were trying to fill the hole. But to me, the end state, the fact is, 2023 hasn't looked amazing either. I mean, now we finally got Starfield. Redfall was a mess. So there's that, but at the same time, this tells me there's just a lot of ill planning. That holes like this, and again, I hate to play the console war stuff because believe me, I'm not trying to do that. But Sony never has these kind of holes, and it's not because Sony first-party developers are so much more talented. No, it's because I think there's way more planning, and everybody understands it's a delicate ecosystem where people go when they're supposed to go, and they give people adequate time to develop. And there's just something about, I think it's the momentum thing. It's not a talent issue over at Microsoft. I think it's a momentum issue where they are out of sync with expectations, release schedule, and actual development cycle. These things are out of sync, and this email chain just confirms it, that even on an exec level, they don't necessarily know how to fix that right now. And the answer isn't buying more studios, because then you just have more people caught up in the out of sync cycle that they're in right now. And you have all these studios, like, where is Fable? Where is, Perfect Dark? All of these major games that they're working on. And at the same time, a lot of these studios had these announcements at the same time. And Yeah, if you have everybody working on massive projects starting at the same time, they're probably not going to be able to have a nice, comfortable, staggered release to fill up those holes. You know what I mean? You're going to have these massive gaps, especially if you were counting on one game for maybe the year, and that slips, you've just lost the year. We've seen that with Halo. We've seen that now with Starfield. It's just it's poor planning on their part, to be honest with you. What did you think about when you heard this?
No, I mean you summed it up great. We knew they were scrambling. You know, when they were trying to tout Redfall as this huge thing, and the way they were acting that, you know, again, not just 2022 but 2023. I mean 2022 even had bigger gaps, but look at the way they dealt with 2023. They were banking on Redfall and Starfield, and those games. Starfield hit a little bit, but Redfall was nothing near that. But it is obvious. I think it's crazy to think that you guys have this many studios, this many IPs, and you had nothing. You didn't have anything. To the other point of them pretty much writing off Baldur's Gate. I can't blame them for that because I wrote off Baldur's Gate all year until a couple weeks before launch when I really started looking what it was and got persuaded. You know, I got the FOMO. I got that. I'll admit it. But I also really like that game, so I don't knock him for that because it's like, you know, ain't nobody know that game was gonna do what it did. But it does show like this. It shows this problem that, and I don't think they really discussed. Well, again, this was in a different mindset, but it's a problem they still have. We don't have anything else for them the rest of this year, and we don't have anything from them looking forward. I think you guys still have major gaps. We still don't know what you're releasing. We don't know where half your studios. It's not really a story, but I think something leaked out yesterday. They're like, yeah, the next Gears is probably in 2026. Yes. I'm like, that's forever, and it's because I think the Gears team was trying to make a different game, and I think we discussed it months back that they canceled that game and was like, no, never mind, just get on that Gears again. And that's terrible. So you're telling me that studio now, whatever they were doing was scrapped, and for 4 years now they have to sort of go back into the Gears machine. So it shows this problem that we know they have. You know, 343 is in limbo, and yet they're still stuck with doing Halo, and they're gonna produce another Halo game at some point, whether you want it or not from them. So it shows that my reaction was like, you still have this problem. You guys still need to figure it out. So instead of scrambling, you need to take a breath, because we've already been years now without big hitters from you specifically, from Microsoft's first party. We can do it again as long as that it means I'd rather not get a bunch of more Redfalls, give you guys the second you need to breathe, and then you can get back on that cadence. You know, we're okay with specific delays, but you delayed Redfall a whole bunch for it to come out in the state that it did. A game that still does not have its 4K patch on Series X. You know, when you scrambling is a nice word. Remember, you have to remember that this is the company that had to issue stickers on their Redfall cases to show that it does not play at 4K or 60 frames, whatever it was that thing. So scrambling just shows that state of mind that they were in last year, this year, and I think are still sort of finally maybe getting their footing. But scrambling is a nice way to put it. Is how I see it.
Yeah, totally. And when I was thinking about their upcoming slate, I know for the rest of the year it's a lot of third party releases, and then from the first party, I know they have Forza Motorsport. That one is tricky because, and that is kind of another issue. It's a whole another can of worms that I won't get too lost in the weeds on, which is the idea of being reliant on first party releases, which is totally fine. Everybody does it, but then making sure that those first party releases have wide appeal. And so, yeah, sure, like Sony has its Gran Turismo and stuff like that. But they're not reliant on that because they always have the Spider-Man, for example, the Ratchet and Clanks, the wide appeal games that Horizon that could really attract large amounts of people. And unfortunately, it seems that Microsoft's kind of caught in a weird area where they're too reliant on first parties that only fulfill these specific niches. Like Starfield's a great the closest they're getting to that, and that's a good step. But like Redfall was always going to be a kind of a tougher sell, because even if it was good, like it's kind of like a perpetually online vampire hunt sim. You know what I mean? Like that's never going to fulfill wide scale appeal. And that's the problem with Forza as well, which is like, I think Forza is pretty damn near the best racing game every time it drops. More so Horizon than Motorsport, but I think Motorsport is still quite good. But yeah, it's that problem where like the best racing game is still never gonna light the world on fire, because it's a racing game. You know what I mean? It's never had that wide scale appeal. So that's kind of a tough position that they're in. I hope they can figure something out, especially for 2024. Next one, Red Dead Redemption 2 might get a next gen update. Cool. I mean, it makes sense. Rockstar has done a lot of these kind of updates. They've just updated, in a way, it's more so actually they technically just ported Red Dead 1 to PS4 and Switch or something like that. So they play around with their old games here and there. Sometimes it makes more sense than others. This game is an amazing game, a beautiful game. I would love to try it out, depending on how they release it. If it's like a paid update, I probably won't give it a shot. But if it's like GTA, the way they did that, where it was the console upgrade and it looked beautiful and plays good, and I'd like to try that out, because that is a gorgeous game, and it still looks incredible for a PS4 game. So if you can clean that up, I'm more than happy to give it a spin on my PS5. Do you have any interest on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the mood right now to replay something like that, but it is one of those things where it's like I'm shocked that it hasn't gotten an update. We're in a world where, Cyberpunk got a free update, GTA's gotten multiple ports and updates. Witcher has gotten a next gen update. Which I didn't even remember that, but yeah, I saw the other day that Witcher has a PS5 update, or a current next gen update, whatever you want to refer to it as. So Red Dead Redemption 2, I know, is that in that talks where people are like, where is it? Why doesn't this have it? And Red Dead, sold really well, so I'm surprised they haven't done it. I would assume it's gonna do, again, it's just sort of quality of life changes. There's a lot of loading, if I remember, in Red Dead 2. So having some of that be sort of sped up would be nice. So it would be something that would make me want to go through Red Dead again, just because of how long that game is and how bogged down it is a little bit by where it was developed for older hardware now.
Yeah, and that's another thing where it's like that game is not like a light you dip in dip out type game for me. Like it's a big world, long, heavy story. If I'm gonna dive back in, I want the time to properly dedicate to it, because that's not something I can casually kind of just like pop in and do a little mission here and there. It's not GTA in that way, where like it's a huge world. So I need to find some timing. So we'll see about that. The last one that I have here is something that was very interesting to me that I don't see anybody even really focused on, which is the fact that the Xbox Series S accounts for 75% of the series owners. So that means between the Series X and S that were both released simultaneously, 75% of the people bought the S and 25% people bought the X. I did not realize that the ratio was that skewed towards the Series S. So apparently it's way more popular than people think it is. But yeah, that's very interesting. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked, just because they never really talk numbers. They never really talk anything. And we've seen sort of almost the vocal minority complaining that the Series S isn't strong enough. But I think when you were able to capitalize on, yes, this is the next system. This is releasing on par with, timing wise at least, the PlayStation 5. $300 compared to the $400 or $500 that the PS5 had, or the Xbox versions. Especially when you say this is going to play every next gen game. It's going to play everything the Series X plays. Slightly different, blah, blah, blah. But if you're looking for that casual percentage of people who are like, hey, with $15 a month, or whatever Game Pass is, so $15 a month and this cheaper $300 system, you get a year of free gaming. And I think that's probably the way they really hit people with it. Spend $500 on a Series X, or for that same price, you get the system, play the same games for free on our catalog. I did not think it was this drastic. When I saw it, I said 75%. I was like, wow, that is huge. Just because, again, they don't talk about it. They don't really mention too much about the Series S, but it's there trucking along, I guess. It's in there doing what it needs to do, though.
Yeah, and I think it speaks a lot about a group of gamers that I feel like there's a lot of arguments about what they're like, to be honest, because I think what is an Xbox gamer, the average Xbox gamer? It's hard to say. Like, it's meant lots of different, they've been a different group every generation. And this tells me that the hardcore tech adopting Xbox gamers are a lot smaller of a group than people think. And there's way more people, I think, that are either not super concerned about having that state of the art hardware, just playing maybe Game Pass games here and there, indie stuff, and then a lot of probably companion people, like having a companion console. So to a lot of people, that might be the Switch, for example. And I think if you have like a Series S and like a PC or a Series S and a PlayStation 5, I think that is accounting for a lot of the people. So I'm assuming it's the people who are like, I just want to be able to play all the Xbox games the cheapest way possible. That's most people, surprisingly. Most people, I guess, in the Xbox ecosystem are not like, I want the most high fidelity experience possible, which makes me wonder if PlayStation did have that same super low option, a $300 PS5, what the numbers would look like on that side. Because I don't say all that to suggest that in any way that the PlayStation ecosystem is different, but you have to keep in mind the offering is completely different. You have a high-end disc-based console and a high-end discless console, and those are pretty much your choices. Or stay in the last gen, which, unlike Xbox has the games available everywhere. So as of right now, I think for the most part, if you haven't even upgraded to Xbox Series period, I think you're still able to play pretty much everything. I don't think there have been too many Series exclusives yet at all. So you could play for the most part everything. You can't say the same for PlayStation. Like, if you're stuck on PS4, there are things you straight up can't play yet. Not a ton, but there are big games that are starting, and it's only increasing with time. Xbox has a completely different strategy. So I wonder if Xbox's strategy has at all impacted the nature of the people in their ecosystem. You know what I mean? Like, people who do care about like super high-end experiences would probably just not gravitate towards that ecosystem, and more people who are like, I want to just upgrade when I feel like upgrading, when it makes sense financially, when there's a incentive to do so, I'll do that. But in the meantime, people kind of just either hunker down with the console they got or buy the cheapest option possible and upgrade for the cheapest possible. So yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, if Sony had that same, if there was a PS5S or something like that, would that number be the same? Would it be 50-50? Like, I just wonder what that'd look like. Yeah,
it is interesting to think that they didn't do that. So it's like, what would the world look like if they did? It is
500 is a lot of money. You know what I mean?
It is,
and I think a lot of PlayStation fans would more than happily probably buy a cheaper option if it was available. Because I know plenty of people who went for the discless. They have discs and they just did away with their PS4 collection just to save that $100. They're like, oh well, I'll do it because it's a lot of money. And you save where you can, and it's tough times. So it makes me wonder, like, if you had that lowest common denominator console version. Like, I know a lot of people crap on the Series S for holding back developers, which I'm sure to some extent it does. But at the same time, obviously the consumers are loving it. And if the consumers are loving it, I think you should have an option for them at all times.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, so overall, those are all the leaks, or for the most part, all the leaks that we covered today. It seems like the FTC is blaming Microsoft for that, the leaks, because and Phil Spencer has already acknowledged it and everything like that. So these are legit and everything like that. Overall, thoughts on the leaks before we move on?
Yeah, some interesting stuff. We always talk about how we would love to be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations, and we essentially did. And then it's even more nuts is that, we were like, well, who leaked this? And FTC was like, yo, Xbox, you guys did that. And they had to own up to it. There was no, well, you're gonna tell the courts no.
They moved quick on that.
It wasn't me. They're like, it was us. So listen, they took it on the chin, Sure, some of this stuff nothing made him look terrible. Some of the stuff just has shown where their ideas are, and it looks like they are on a full-fledged, we want to fix the Xbox brand, and they're somewhat doing the right steps for that.
Yeah, I don't see any major PR implications to this. I think the major problem is that, now everybody knows their plans for the next 6 years, 5-6 years, which is certainly not ideal for marketing. You know what I mean? I'm sure they're going through it. But then I think they're going to take some early heat for the Elder Scrolls 6 stuff. However, if that doc is true, which it seems like it is, they were going to get that heat inevitably anyways.
Yep.
So they're, if anything, it just kind of expedited that process. So yeah, like people are upset. And I think, exclusivity, you have the right to not like that if you're in an ecosystem and they keep doing that. It's fundamentally customer unfriendly at times. So I understand the frustrations there. So if anything, that kind of just moved it up, not necessarily created something new. But it certainly did release numbers and a look at their pipeline. That's probably not ideal for them, but I don't see that changing their public perception dramatically any more than the FTC case did. They did more damage to themselves in terms of continually telling everybody that they're small potatoes. That's what did worse for their I think general the way the general populace viewed them rather than these leaks, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. So we can switch gears into PlayStation also having a pretty big announcement. Something came out of nowhere for when I saw it. But Jim Ryan will be leaving the post of head of PlayStation in March 2024. This comes obviously from Alex Stedman over at IGN. Jim Ryan, who's been president and CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment since 2019, is retiring in March 2024. The news first broke via post on Twitter or X from Jason Schreier from Bloomberg before Sony confirmed it with their own announcement shortly after. Hiroki Totoki will assume the interim CEO role starting on April 1st, 2024. The Sony Group corporate president, COO, CEO, and CFO will also become the chairman of SIE starting next month to support Mr. Ryan in his transition. Additionally, Sony said they will be working closely with Sony Group Corporation and CEO Kenshiro Yoshida to navigate PlayStation's future, including the succession of the SIE CEO. In a statement today, Ryan cited the difficulty of living in Europe while working in North America as a reason for the decision. A pretty big change in the game here. Jim Ryan, who's been hated, praised, and memed to all extents since 2019, really taking that post, is stepping down. Citing for obviously more personal reasons, but I think he's definitely probably stuck around this long through the whole success. You think since 2019 to now was the launch and continued launch of the PlayStation 5. So he has a lot of props. I know we know the memes, crying Jim Ryan and all the issues people have had with him, from good and bad. But all in all, I think he leaves a pretty big hole in the head of it. And I understand that everything I just stated, obviously they're looking for someone to take that replacement. I wonder where they're going to go. The heads of PlayStation sometimes are people more on the upfront, someone who knows, someone who is there, right? You think Jim Ryan versus Phil Spencer, and who's the next opponent is the way people are sort of seeing it. But I really do wonder what the next sort of arc for PlayStation is under this new, whoever gets the positions, future will be. So how did you react to Jim Ryan retiring?
Yeah, mixed. I have a lot of feelings about it because it's one of those things where, obviously Sony's not a one-man show. No company is. So naturally, no one person, I think, really fundamentally shapes the sole direction that a company goes in. So there's lots, I think, of people to credit Sony's success with. But there's no doubt that under his leadership, at the very least from 2019 onwards, things have been pretty good for PlayStation. You know what I mean? He's had some backwards views at times that, that I think he was straight up wrong about. specifically related to crossplay and backwards compatibility. I remember being a thing where he had some kind of goofy ideas about that. But that is kind of it was more of a strategic thing of he had this strategy of no one cares about it until it makes sense, until we are ready to do it, basically. You know what I mean? Nobody cares about name changes until name changes are ready. Nobody cares about backwards compatibility until we have an offering for that. And so that was just kind of his spin on it. That's how he did things. But there's no denying that PlayStation was in pretty good shape under his tutelage. So, I'm hoping he can find a situation that works better for him. The question I think on everybody's mind is what will, if any, the strategy changes will be with the changing of the head. Will somebody come on with a radical new vision and change, or will somebody just kind of continue and maintain the status quo? Is the question. I assume we won't see any major changes for quite a while because as a CEO you come on, and unless your company is in dire straits, I don't see you making radical decisions to fundamentally change strategy and processes. You know what I mean? You have the freedom to do so, but if whoever inherits the ship right now is inheriting a ship in pretty good shape. You know what I mean? The first party's in good shape. The console's selling well. People like you for the most part. And things are going well. And so I don't see anybody stepping in, looking around, and it's nope, I'm going to change all this. I don't see why you do. I think maintaining course and maybe, adding your own flavor, maybe if you want to emphasize, if the new CEO, for example, is way more enthusiastic about esports, for example, so there's a renewed interest in pushing in that direction, or indie games, or I think there's going to be small changes like that, where focus might shift a little bit depending on what the CEO feels makes the most sense for the company. But I don't see a radical change. So when everybody's Jim Ryan stepping off, everything's gonna fall apart or everything's gonna be saved, I don't see it going in either direction, to be honest with you, because I don't think any one person really shapes it that to that extent.
Yeah, and they're gonna leave him a game plan, whoever takes that role. That's what all the CEO, that's what their job is, right? Is whoever gets elected, whether it's from internal, from external, whoever takes that role, it's obvious that they're gonna be trained. I don't want to use the improper word, but to be trained and shown, listen, this is what's on the game plan. Is this something you can execute? And then they're either going to succeed or not succeed. But I think there's so many, Sony being so huge and these companies being so huge, there's so many safeguards. They know what they're going to do. So it is going to be more of a, this next person stepping in it's interesting enough, will probably be maybe still on the board for PlayStation 6 or whatever comes next. So it is interesting to see them get in at the groundworks, right? We're getting the rumblings of the next generation already. So this is a weird time, I would say, but maybe the perfect time to maybe get someone in there to steerhead this next sort of chapter.
Yeah, in terms of especially transitions, when Jim Ryan came on, he came on in 2019, so we're talking 2 years before the PS5 anyways. So he jumped in very late PS4. So he got to jump in the basically you would imagine the mid to ground level of the development of the next console. And so he got to really shape the vision for the launch of the next hardware for things, which is an incredibly challenging time to jump on. I think a lot of people are like, oh, you jump on new generation, nice clean place to jump on. Yes, but you're also having to control an entire generation refresh. Your player count starts at 0 again, and it's easy with a series of different direction choices you make and bad marketing. You could easily go from 360 to Xbox One. That's what happens when you have bad vision. You know what I mean? In terms of marketing for the new generation release. So I think whoever does join right now, it's actually not a terrible time. I mean, you get a chance to get comfortable, get your footing way before you have to handle one of the toughest things ever, which is a new generation jump and transition. So best of luck to them. And, it was a decent run, Jim Ryan, but we'll see how the new person kind of sets in and what direction they take.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next one, or the last story we have, is a pretty big one. A lot of people are potentially concerned about, but right now we're kind of in a limbo zone with it. But this is by Claire Lewis over there at GameSpot. A potential SAG-AFTRA video game strike is maybe imminent. SAG-AFTRA announced on Thursday that its scheduled talks with various gaming industry employers ended quickly and without an agreement being formed. The meetings, which began on Tuesday, were undertaken with the goal of renegotiating terms with the current interactive media agreement, especially as it relates to pay, streaming rights, and the use of artificial intelligence. After failing to reach an agreement, the following statement was posted to the union's website. SAG-AFTRA and video game employers concluded scheduled negotiations for the interactive media agreement. No deal was reached, and the current agreement will remain in effect while the parties make final efforts to reach a deal. SAG-AFTRA recently voted to authorize a strike against 10 major gaming industry juggernauts with 98.32% of the union's 160,000 members. So we're not talking about a tiny union here. Members voting in favor of the strike. If the aforementioned final efforts to reach a deal fail, the strike is almost certain to come next, impacting the following entertainment companies: Activision, Blindsight, Disney, Electronic Arts or EA, Epic, Formosa, Insomniac, Take-Two, VoiceWorks, and WB. So, I've noticed a lot of people are like, oh, strike is happening. Not necessarily. Strikes happen when you can't reach a deal. They're trying to reach a deal, but if the deal doesn't come, here comes a strike. And basically anybody who's paid close attention to, especially outside of gaming, with the movie sector and writers and actors, and anybody who's watched this show and knows what's been happening in the game industry with the attempts to unionize, and that's unionize the developers, let alone the writers and actors who are already unionized. And the fact that we know royalty splits have been not good, and writers have been pretty mistreated, pretty bad, and actors have been treated pretty bad, and there's been issues back and forth between these industries, and these corporate juggernauts have been going through it for quite a while. This doesn't surprise me whatsoever, and what's interesting is I don't think people understand the scale at which this is kind of a unified effort. We're talking 98.32% of the union's 160,000 members, so we're talking about every actor, basically every writer, basically saying, yeah, like, we need to take a look at this industry, which tells me they need to take a look at this industry. If everybody's on the same page about this, that means something needs to change one way or another. Whether you agree with the direction or strategy that they're taking, if you have that much of a unified approach, that tells me that the pricing model that's been established, or the pay model that's been established historically, is not sustainable, whether you like it or not. That needs to be renegotiated. Thoughts on this?
No, yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's not interesting in the sense that it's like I'm super into it, but it's like I understand with what's going on in the movie world with I don't know about the time when this article was written, the writers part of the Writers Guild of America has ended their strike and come to a tentative agreement. It's like, well, that stuff's, I said, there's a lot of similarities between writing for what these movies and shows are, and doing the writing that goes on in these games. The productions of these two things, shooting a movie and making a game, are similar, very similar. If you think about the way we've done voice acting to mocap and all that stuff, it's like very similar. And again, we had a strike, I think it was 2016, and then it says it later on in the GameSpot article, so definitely read the last two statements they talk about the previous one, and that it lasted pretty decently, and it affected people in a way. It was something I didn't even knew, actually, about how the Life is Strange prequel doesn't even use the same voice actor because of what happened. But it's interesting that, and I don't think if there is a full-on strike, I don't think it'll be lasting as long, because it's obviously they're trying to get to a point prior to where almost, when you look at what happened with SAG-AFTRA in the movie industry, it was almost overnight, where it's like all this stuff sort of fell apart. And I think because of that is why they're taking it so much more care right now in this industry. And I think it's an obvious thing. So hopefully they come to the agreement, right? These people are doing a job for a certain amount. They're part of a union, which is the biggest thing. And you don't want to start getting to that point where games get moved and there's like weird decisions because of that, because you're affecting everyone's product and stuff people want to be proud of, but at the same time people who put in that hard work want to get paid what they should, and that's what this is about specifically. So they have my support for sure.
Yeah, and for me it's like a math thing, really. Like it's kind of like a perfect storm that it's an inevitability when you have an industry that generates, let's say, this huge amount of money. Let's say, billions per year it generates, and an agreed upon and acceptable portion of that profit is not making it to the creative people who are generating said thing. We already know, we're talking about the actors here and the writers specifically. We're not even mentioning the fact that the developers and what they're going through, and unfortunately they're not unionized, so this may happen. This is likely going to eventually happen again with the developers, I'm sure.
Yep.
But they're not getting their proportional portion of that profit. And then on top of that, you have the changing landscape of the changes in technology and release strategies. And so historically, for example, I could speak a little bit about the music industry. There was a huge issue where a lot of artists would make back-end money or royalties on physical sales. And I would imagine there's a similar pay structure in the game industry for someone as a part of that development cycle. But what happens when you transition, as many studios have been, to a streaming model? Well, then naturally your contracts would have to be amended or renegotiated to account for those major industry shifts. And in this case, we're talking a lot about AI specifically, and what that does to voice actors, which can effectively put you out of job immediately. And so it's one of those situations where it's like if the actors already feel like they're probably not getting their fair cut and their fair shake, and now you're going to introduce a tech that's going to take me out of a job. Yeah, like I think and we already know you're generating this amount of profits and you're trying to maximize that even more by forcing me out. It doesn't surprise me necessarily that this will happen, and I think it's going to happen again, and I think there's going to be a conflict every time if there are major industry shifts, there has to be major contractual shifts at the same time, or this is going to happen every time. And that is just me paying attention to music and then seeing it happen in movies and now seeing it happen in games. Like this is, and I would imagine might happen in comics too eventually. Same deal, same release structure. Where, because just like AI voice acting is a concern, AI script writing is also a very big concern. So
huge concern.
Yeah, so like these are things that for anybody who's an ed consumer, I totally understand why people can maybe be a little frustrated. It's like, listen, I just want the product. But I also think you need to take into effect that like humans are generating this and they want to, pay their bills and take care of their families like everybody else. And that we need to be conscientious of the fact that like things are moving quick, and it's important that the financial structures of said industries move with it, or all of this collapses. Because I think when it's all said and done, if one dude keeps profiting more and more and more with the technology, and now suddenly people, you want to talk about projects being held up. What about when actors can't afford to be actors anymore, so they stop being actors? You're going to be relying on just AI? Well, if you think things are stale now, let me tell you about robot generated scripts and music and games. So I think people should just be a little bit more conscientious about the fact that there is a human component to it, and so we need to like take care of the actual creatives, because like it or not, these execs are not generating product. They generate they divvy up profits, but they're not generating products. So it's important for us as game fans, specifically, talking on a gaming podcast, to support those who are fundamental in the actual creation of games. Not the people who own the IPs, who own the tech, but rather the people who are fundamental to generating the tech. Because if we don't have the creators, we don't got anything. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that's the last story we have. Great stuff coming. I'm very excited because the next show we do, Will Spider-Man be out by that time? I know Assassin's Creed Mirage is right around the corner. I know Spider-Man 2 is right around the corner. So we have some bangers coming, and I'm very, very excited about that.
Super Mario Wonders is the same day as Spider-Man 2.
Oh, I can't wait for Wonder. Wonder looks so good. Everybody's joking on it. Everybody's joking about the elephant, but that game's gonna be fun as hell. That's gonna be a nice combo. I love a good, and I'm so sorry, Xbox. I love a good Sony first party combo and a Nintendo first party combo, and the Nintendo being kind of like my palate cleanser before I go to bed type thing. I love that combo.
It's been a while since we've had a broke October, as I always like to say. We have Assassin's Creed this week. Then right before Mario, we have Sonic Superstars, which I'm excited for. Then you got Spider-Man, Mario on the same day. Alan Wake 2 later in the month. And then you have Xbox releasing nothing, so it's okay.
Xbox, please. But yeah, no, October is going to be insane. And it's not exactly the same, but it gives me the same vibe of, you remember that Doom Animal Crossing combo? I love it.
Yeah.
It's like the gaming version of Barbenheimer. And I know, that like Spider-Man's not like a heavy game or anything like that, but that's going to be like my main focus, and then we can have on the side like Mario Wonder. I love when they do that, and obviously they don't sync it up on purpose, but they obviously look at the metrics, and Nintendo knows that like, I don't think we're losing sales by dealing with, we're talking 2 exclusives here, so they're not multi-plats, so they don't have to worry about cannibalizing each other. Yep. I'm just very, very psyched about that, and my bank account is not whatsoever.
For real.
But this has been the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys all enjoyed.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.